Ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, welcome to C.O.G Music. This video is going to be another episode of Random Thoughts. For some reason recently, I've been doing a lot of thinking about things that were common when I was young. That if you're someone who was born after 1990 or so, you may not be familiar of certain things that existed. You may be as well, but I would think a lot of people that young aren't. I was born in 1966, so a good portion of my growing up was done through the 1970s and early to mid 1980s. This is just some random thoughts I had. Things sometimes I actually miss. Number one, rotary dial phones. Now, at one point in the house I grew up in, we had three phones. One in my parents' bedroom, one in our kitchen, and one in our basement. And all three at one point were all rotary dial phones. You hated to have to call a phone number that had a lot of zeros in it, because that meant it was going to take longer to dial the number, because you had to go all the way around and wait for it to go back and repeat. The push button phone replaced that when I still was relatively young, and my parents replaced the phone in their bedroom and in the kitchen with one of those, but we kept the rotary dial phone in the basement. And it even got to the point where I had friends would come over, and the TV was down in the basement, so we would go down there to watch TV, and some of them would just crack up because they couldn't believe that we still had a rotary dial phone. The next thing involves records. The difference in size. When a band would release a single, the song that was most likely to be a hit off of an album, they would release a 45 RPM record. You got a bonus because if you flipped it over, there was another song on the back. Your standard album being released by a group was on a 33 RPM, larger disc, but it had a small hole in the middle. If you were going to play 45, you needed an adapter that fit over the pin that stuck up in the middle of your turntable to fill up the larger hole in the 45. My dad actually had records that played at 78 RPM. And of course, that meant you had to have a turntable / stereo that was capable of playing all of them. 45 RPM, 33 RPM, or 78 RPM. The next thing is related to what I was just talking about. And it goes back to the 45 RPM single. Now, the song that was supposedly going to be the hit song on an album, or at least one of the more popular, often played on the radio songs, was referred to as the A side. The other side was called the B side, and that was one that may be a great song, but it was just less likely for some reason to get played on the radio. That wasn't always the case. A good example of that A side versus B side, and B side being a very famous song. The example I thought of was the Beach Boys released the 45 single for Wouldn't It Be Nice? As the A side, and the B side was God Only Knows. And God Only Knows is thought by many to be one of the most perfect pop songs ever written. And both went on to have very large popularity and airplay on the radio. On to the next one, which is phone booths.
I'm in a glass case of emotion.
Or public phones in general. They, at one point, were everywhere. A very good portion of my life has been spent without the existence of cell phones. And when you were out, so if there was an emergency and you needed to make a phone call, you were going to have to use a public phone. Now, public phones were pretty much at every single gas station that existed. But phone booths were more likely to be in the center of a town or on street corners in the city. But on a lot of those phone booths, the receiver that you held in your hand to listen and talk with was very sticky. Lots of residue and dirt and who knows what else was on it. And you actually had to look up numbers in the phone book that were supposed to be chained to a small desk top area in the phone booth area, and people either would steal the entire book or rip out pages that had a phone number that they needed. So for the most part, those have disappeared. So the next thing I wanted to talk about were black and white television sets. Specifically the smaller, what they referred to as portable, black and white TV sets. Now, at the time I was growing up, TV shows and movies were all filmed in color. But there was a big price difference relatively to that time between how much a color television cost and a black and white television cost. Now, our main family TV was down in our basement, and it was, again, relative to those times, a larger screen and color. But when it started to get to the point where I wanted to get my own TV set for my bedroom, and I knew there was no way, no matter how hard I worked, I was going to be able to afford a color television set. So I saved money, and I did save up enough to get a small black and white television set to keep in my bedroom. So I had something to watch when somebody else was watching something I really didn't want to watch on the color television set down in our basement. There was no internet. There was no home computers that anybody owned in the time I was, again, growing up. So if you wanted to research something or learn about something, you had to go to the library. That was pretty much your source that you had of information. We did have a set of Encyclopedia Britannicas, which included some information, very small generalizations on many subjects. To go deeper, get more information, if I had a homework paper that had to be a certain number of papers or a certain number of words, and you really needed some substance to what you were going to be writing about, I went to the local library or the school library. Either way, both of them had this thing called the Dewey Decimal System. that's how you looked up books. They were categorized by the Dewey Decimal System to match up with shelves in the library. You can look up the topic you were wanting to gain information on, write down a number. There were numbers to the left and right of the decimal point, hence the Dewey Decimal System, and it would pertain to a general subject that books would pertain to, and it also was extremely helpful to let you know which shelf it was going to be on in the library and exactly what portion of that shelf you would find it in. So I just wanted to reference the Dewey Decimal System. It was something we had to be taught in school how to use, and that's, there was these small filing type looking wooden cabinets that had all of these index cards that, alphabetical order, pull them out in regards to the topic you wanted to research. And then each index card referred to a specific book on that subject. And that's how you looked things up. That's how you found the book or books that you needed. So, smoking in restaurants and airplanes. I remember when this was allowed. If you were going to make a flight reservation, you would have to do it in a smoking or non-smoking seating area, which was hilarious because it doesn't matter. If you're in the non-smoking area, you're going to be breathing smoke. All of the air in the airplane is just sucked up and recirculated. So that was kind of ridiculous. And restaurants as well had smoking or non-smoking seating areas, and usually they would ask you when you came in if you wanted a table in smoking or non-smoking, and a lot of the times you would just ask what has the shortest wait time and choose that one. But again, people at the smoking area wasn't a separate room, it was just a sectioned off area. And of course, people's smoke would go all over. So even if you weren't a non-smoker, you were breathing smoke. I also wanted to mention a thing on TV, Saturday mornings, in between cartoons. Saturday mornings were the only mornings that cartoons were on. It was called Schoolhouse Rock. Our sophomore year in high school, all of us had to take American political life. And one of the things we were tested on that we would have to write out word for word was the preamble to the United States Constitution. And everyone knew it because it was set to music on Schoolhouse Rock. The preamble to the Constitution. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and promote the blessings of liberty, for ourself and our posterity to ordain as established this Constitution of the United States of America. Everyone knew the preamble to the Constitution because of Schoolhouse Rock in that song. And it was funny because when we got tested on it and you were writing it out, you could hear everyone in the class, softly singing that song as they were writing. So there were lots of great Schoolhouse Rock episodes, really educational. Seems like things like that have disappeared, unfortunately. So, only other thing I wanted to suggest was, if you have not seen the movie Hot Tub Time Machine, there are examples in it. It's a very funny movie, but accurate as far as its depiction of what it was like in the 1980s. Some of the things I mentioned pop up in that movie. So that's going to do it for this video. If you have your own personal memories of odd things that were around when you were younger, that for the most part you can't find anymore, leave them in the comments, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I will catch you on the next one. Have fun.